We'll get this show on the road. Thank you for coming out tonight. It's great to see so many of you. I'm Jeff Mitzler, Director of the Etna Library. I have a few announcements and then I will turn it over to Sarah. First, I wanted to thank the First Baptist Church of Etna for allowing us to use Trumbull Hall tonight. I'd also like to thank the Etna Ladies Aid Society for covering the rental costs for the library. Really appreciate that. A few announcements and then we will get to Sarah. So in 2 weeks from tonight, same time, same place, we will have author and historian Erin Moulton here. She will be giving a talk called The Beginner's Guide to Cemetery Sleuthing, and she'll be teaching us about the meaning behind cemetery iconography, abbreviations, epitaphs, and more. So hope you can be back in this room in a couple of weeks. This will be a New Hampshire Humanities supported event, and I do want to say a few words about the New Hampshire Humanities organization. New Hampshire Humanities just celebrated their 50th anniversary. The organization does amazing things all throughout the state, including a lot of great things for libraries. Unfortunately, on April 1st, the Department of Government Efficiency proposed cutting the National Endowment for Humanities by $175 million, which is an 80% reduction that would effectively shut down the organization. These cuts include prematurely canceling grants specifically made to fund state humanities councils. New Hampshire Humanities has lost, without warning, almost half of their funding for the remainder of this year. The Etna Library had 2 additional upcoming New Hampshire Humanities supported programs scheduled for the fall that we will now need to cancel. So if the arts and humanities, if libraries and museums, if these things are important in your life, please consider contacting your congressional delegation, other local officials, elected officials, and let them know about these things being important to you. And just keep advocating for and supporting these institutions in whatever ways make sense to you. In other brighter news, the Etna Library will be participating in Green Up Hanover Week. There's a week-long series of events and engagements centered around Earth Day. This will run from April 21st through 27th, and complete details are on the Hanover Parks and Recs website. The Etna Library will be participating as part of this with a new Earth Day themed story walk going up in the fields behind the library, as well as recycled crafts happening all week long at the library, and a recycled art show at the end of the week. Finally, speaking of green things, the Etna Library Seed Library has returned, so we have dozens of varieties of seeds, hundreds of packets of seeds, all free, so please come by and browse those. And that brings us to tonight and to Sarah Molesworth's talk. Sarah has worked at the Etna Library for 11 years, I believe, and 6 of these years, the last 6, have been as assistant librarian. Not counting the library's two terrific substitutes, the Etna Library is run entirely by Sarah and myself. That means we both wear a lot of professional hats and do a little bit of everything at the library, working hard to offer more ongoing and special events, more circulating materials than you might expect from a library of our size. Sarah always goes above and beyond in everything she does for the Etna Library, and this talk tonight is a perfect example of that. She consistently brings a palpable kindness and creativity to the Etna Library that makes the library a lot more than it otherwise would be. So please join me tonight in giving Sarah Molesworth a round of applause, not just for her being here tonight, but for everything she does for the Etna Library and for this community.
Thank you, and welcome. I'm a little nervous, but I hope that once I start, it'll all be fine. Good evening, and thanks for joining us. Tonight, I will be sharing my experiences of hiking or trekking to Everest Base Camp this past November. I never expected in my lifetime to travel to Everest Base Camp, and in many ways, I feel that this trip chose me rather than the other way around. My trek was called Everest to End Duchenne.
Sarah, can you speak up a little?
Yes. What is Duchenne? Duchenne is a rare genetic disorder, and it is a form of muscular dystrophy. It affects 1 in 3,500 male births, and it's a progressive muscle wasting disease for which there is no cure. Those suffering from Duchenne lose their ability to walk and eventually lose all muscle functions. Most individuals don't live past their mid-20s. So the mission of this trek Everest to End Duchenne was to raise awareness for the disease and fund and research and help to find a cure for Duchenne and to improve the lives of those living with Duchenne. Oops, that was just a little bit more. I'd like to introduce Griffin. This is Griffin. About 10 years ago, right after I had started doing part-time work at the library, I was a substitute. I was called back to help teach a large kindergarten class, and Griffin was in my class. Griffin had recently been diagnosed with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and how that showed in the classroom was his speed and his endurance were less than, it was harder for him to run fast or to keep up with the other children on the playground. And I noticed on school hikes, his dad would have to carry him much of the way up big sections of the trail. So I've always felt a connection to Griffin with hiking and Duchenne. So that's why I do this. I do this for Griffin and for all kids that are suffering from Duchenne. And so I just want to show you a few slides of Griffin. Griffin is now 16 years old. He's looking forward to getting his driver's permit soon. He likes to fish. He likes to swim. He skis. He loves skiing. He has a special adaptive ski called a bi-ski, and he is out often in the winter doing this adventure. He loves purple, and he likes video editing, so this is him video editing. He likes to travel. This is him on a trail, an accessible trail, and there aren't a lot of those around, but I have seen a few. And this is the night before I left for Duchenne. I went to visit Griffin, and Griffin gave me a special necklace that he wanted me to bring up to Everest Base Camp and back. Griffin, his name is, there's a mythical creature that's called a griffin, and it's part lion and part eagle. And this is a necklace that somebody gave him when he was in preschool, and he really wanted that to go all the way up to Everest and back down. So I was terrified that I would lose it. I had it in duct tape, and I had it in a special place in my pack. Okay, this is Tanya. It's just important for you to know some of the players in this story. This is Tanya. She is the founder of the Hope for Gus Foundation, and she is also the one who leads the Everest Base Camp trek. So it was through Tanya that I was invited to go on this trip. Her son also has Duchenne muscular dystrophy. He's 20, and this is Gus, who the organization is named after. He likes to travel as well, and he loves to fish. Oops, that's the next one, so hold on. We'll just keep that there for a minute. So something that Gus's mom told me is, she said, Gus has worked hard to find hobbies and develop passions that he can do despite his limited mobility. He loves to fish, cook, and try new foods and make digital music. He is an excellent student, and he is going to college next year for audio engineering. So when Tanya asked me if I would do this trek, I must admit that I was very unsure about it. I was feeling like, am I too old for this? Are my lungs cut out for this? And there were a lot of things that I was thinking. I felt like we live at sea level, and that's a really high hike. I've never done anything like that before. Will I be able to make it? In the end, after talking to lots of people and reading books and thinking about it, I decided that I did need to go, and these were some of the reasons. Despite my age, I am still strong, and my muscles still work well, and I can train, and I can do hard things. His muscles are not getting stronger. They're deteriorating by the day. Such a grand trip. I thought lots of people will want to follow me. Lots of people will be interested in learning about Duchenne. I can spread the word and broaden the circle. And I thought people might want to donate. I reasoned that each new person that made this trip would make a different circle of friends and make the outreach even bigger. And I still do really believe that that's true. This trek held a lot of symbolism. Some of the things that kids with Duchenne go through on a daily basis are, it's hard for them to breathe, it's hard for their lungs to work, they have tired muscles. Well, those were all things that I was sure to experience going up on my trek. They were also things that I knew would only be temporary and I would be okay. This was a unique opportunity to raise hope, awareness, and research for Duchenne. And Tanya had done this trip safely 5 times already, and she had used the same people as guides, so I felt reassured that I would be safe and that I could do this trip. So now let's go on. These are actually, while this is up, I'll just show you. We had porters that would carry all of our belongings, which was really nice because I didn't have to carry as heavy of a backpack. So this is Adish. He was usually our sweep, so he stayed in the back of our trail. We all did kind of walk in a line, so he would be in the back. And Berta would be in the front saying slowly, slowly in Nepalese. And then these were our porters, and they carried our bags. And the porters are amazingly strong humans. It is unbelievable what they carry on their backs. And when I show my slides a little bit later, you'll see pictures of them. Okay. So for training, to prep for this trek, I took every possible opportunity to walk, hike, whatever I could do to stay active and to build up my endurance. Though it was hard to get the training for altitude, I did carry a heavy pack and hoped that that would help my lungs to work harder. I tried to pick trails that were steep trails, and as it got closer to the end and ready for me to trek, I started ramping up my intensity by going faster and not taking as many breaks. And I knew I wouldn't be able to do that on the trail in Everest, but I had limited ways to train for the altitude here. I was fortunate to get to go on a few trips, so I'm going to show you my training, the places that I trained. And they were in New England, the Dolomites. I went to the Dolomites for 8 days and carried a 30-pound pack, so there are a few pictures from that. Just bear with me. Technology is not my thing. Okay. Okay. So this, I'm not going to say anything for this. I'm just going to let you see. These are pictures from my training. This is the Dolomites. There was still snow there. So when I was in the Dolomites, I was trekking up and down each day about 2,500 to 3,000 feet.
Where are the Dolomites?
They're in Italy. It's the Italian Alps. And this is the Northeast. This is Bryce and Zion. Angel's Landing, and such a beautiful spot in the world. California. I hiked a little bit in the Sierra Buttes and on the Pacific Crest Trail for just a little bit. and that was the end. That was about 5 days before I left for my trip. That's me on Camel's Hump. But I mostly hiked on Mount Cube on the Appalachian Trail. It was a steep enough trail. It was close to home so that I could do it frequently and just practice a lot, because I needed to be able to do something close to home and still be able to live everyday life. So, gear. What I brought for gear was, this is a really baby backpack. This is my smallest backpack, but this is the backpack that I used on my trek, because we had porters that would carry all of the things that we didn't need, like my sleeping bag, extra clothes, anything that we didn't need for the day. So during the day, I would usually keep my water in here. I did use a Camelback, which I had never used before, because I'm notoriously bad for hydrating, and I knew that if I didn't hydrate well, that was not going to be good for the altitude. So I did take this. I'm glad I got it, because it allowed me to keep drinking during the day. One of the things that we had to be careful of was the water. You couldn't drink the water, it was unsafe to drink. So I used 2 different methods. I had a SteriPen, which I loved. The SteriPen is this very easy little gadget. You turn it on and you put it in your water, and when you put it in your water, it gives you an unhappy face. And then you just stir it around. It's ultraviolet light. You stir it around until you get the happy face, which happens in about 90 seconds. So it's really quick. So what I did was I would usually fill up my water at the sink with this bottle in the morning. I would treat it with my SteriPen, because I knew it would be ready in 90 seconds and I could start drinking right away. This I couldn't use my SteriPen in, so I used something called Aquamira drops, and they're 2 different drops. One's a neutralizer. You mix them together, and basically all went from the start to the end. This water bag is ready in about 30 minutes. So my theory was, start with this. I know that this is safe. I can start drinking right away on the trail. I can let this sit and work for the half hour, because I'll never finish this in half an hour, just knowing myself. And then when it's time to drink it, it's safe. So that is what I did. So a lot of people used tablets for treating their water. I needed hiking boots, so I had to purchase new hiking boots, because I really didn't wear hiking boots that much. I love wearing trail runners in the woods, but I was strongly encouraged to get hiking boots. So these hiking boots were really comfortable. The way that they make shoes now, there is not as much of a break-in, and they're just very comfortable. So I was happy with that purchase. And I brought my poles. I don't always hike with poles around here. In fact, like all winter, I usually forget about my poles. But I have found that poles are really important for going downhill especially. They do save your knees, and even going uphill, they do help you keep your energy level a little bit longer. So I was glad to use my poles. And these poles have been on over 550 miles of planned through hikes. And I love them. Let's see. I also we needed rain gear. We were very fortunate. The weather was gorgeous. We had 2 days of a little bit of rain, but other than that, we could not have asked for better weather. The temperatures ranged from about 50 degrees at the bottom near Lukla, and then at the top, by the time we got to the top, it was a little below 0 at night, but during the day it was about 20. So my sleeping bag is what I slept in at night, and you'll see a picture a little bit later, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that, because it was just kind of funny to me. It's quite cold in those tea houses. So the next part, now it was time to fly, and this next part is called Welcome to Nepal.
Excuse me, Sarah, what time of the year was this? When was this?
This was November, beginning of November, which is the end of their trekking season. Okay, oops. Okay, before I do this, I just want to tell you that before I play these slides, we stayed in Kathmandu in a pretty busy section of town. And when I arrived, I had never been to a place like Kathmandu. They were celebrating, I'm not even sure if I'm saying this correctly, Diwali. And there were lots of colorful lights. There were prayer flags everywhere. There were lights. There were little candles on the ground that were with these very beautiful powdered, they were like painted pictures with powder and candles near them. And I was surprised to see that they were tea candles. They were just sitting on the ground. And I remember I kicked one by accident and thought, oh, I'm gonna light the whole place on fire. But amazingly, these were everywhere and nothing happened. So it was busy and loud, and there were rickshaws, motorcycles, cars, bicycles, pedestrians, walking wherever there was a space. It appeared to be organized or routine organized chaos, and miraculously, nobody got run over. The atmosphere was celebratory, colorful, and happy. Aside from the times that our team gathered for meals, we were able to go out and have freedom to explore. And here are some of the pictures that I took in Kathmandu. And when I was there, I purchased 2 baby yaks. You might have seen on my first picture, there were 2 things hanging on the outside. Those were 2 baby yaks that I purchased. One was for Griffin and one was for his brother, and I wanted to get something that would start all the way at the bottom, make it up to base camp, and come back down. So they now have those. I don't have those anymore, but it was a trip for Griffin, so I gave those away. So here this is Nepal. This is our whole group. Our whole group had not met until we got there, so that was the first time that we had all met. There were 7 people from New England, and there were 2 internationals, one from Sweden and one from Norway. There were 3 members of our team that have children with Duchenne. And every place was colorful like this. This is where we stayed. That's where I found coffee. I needed coffee. They had lots of open air spaces that had fruits and vegetables. They had beans. Everything was almost like an art laid out. It was very beautiful. There were lots of places for worship. There was one place that I went into, and I was able to purchase candles and in memory of my mom and John's mom and dad, and just go in and say some prayers. There was a parade going on, but there's a lot going on in the streets. This actually doesn't look too busy because you can see motorcycles, people, bicycles, but I think that this was some kind of parade that they were having, and I don't know what. That's Durbar Square, and there was a lot going on in that square. I just like this picture. Lots of colorful fabric shops, lots of stupas everywhere. I love the stupa's eyes. And the architecture and the colors and the gold, and it was just beautiful. That gives you a little sense of what it looked like in the streets. I think that they were displaying the dresses, but it reminded me of Barbie dolls. That's dalbat. That's a traditional lentil dish, and I really, really liked that. The stupas really spoke to me, so there are a lot of them. Okay, and there we are at the airport. And there's my bag, and you can actually see that the yaks are on my bag, but it was time for us to fly now. We had spent our time in Kathmandu, and it was time for us to fly to Lukla, we hoped. But the airport, the weather at Lukla can be very questionable, and there was a lot of fog, and it was very overcast. The first plane that took off was able to take off. It went up to Lukla, but it was not able to land there. It tried to land at other places, but it was not able to land and came back. So we ended up waiting almost all day, waiting to see if we could take a plane out. But there were no more planes going out, so we had to make a decision. We could either wait until the next day and maybe run into the same problems again and be delayed, or we could take a helicopter. And to take a helicopter, it needed to be a unanimous decision. We all decided to take the helicopter, and it was not as scary as I thought. It was actually quite fun. You were kind of low, you were lower than a plane, and you could see, and it wasn't as noisy as I had expected it to be. So, let's see.
So what's the elevation of Kathmandu? Do you remember?
I don't remember. Do you remember, Jim?
Which?
The elevation of Kathmandu?
I think it's only about 5 or 6
Yeah, it's
thousand.
not very much. Okay. So, you probably won't really be able to see this from here, but if you want to look at it more after, feel free to come up. I tried to put the green pins as go, to go up, and the red pins were going down. Yellow is Everest Base Camp. We were supposed to start here, which you probably can see. We were supposed to start at this red pin, but we weren't able to go there because we took a helicopter instead of the plane. So we ended up at Surkey, which was a little below Lukla. And when we got in, you'll see it's getting dark. So I'm going to talk a little bit while this is going on, but so this is when we've landed at the tea house after getting off the helicopter. You can see it's starting to get dark, and we will end up walking in the dark like this to our first tea house. Not only are we in a very unfamiliar place, but we are walking in the dark. Yes, that bridge actually was very mild. These were prayer wheels. I loved the prayer wheels. And these are work animals. Not only were there porters carrying heavy bags like this, but there were also lots of work animals that were carrying supplies or gas or things for the tea houses. There was a saying that you wanted to stay on the high side so that you didn't get knocked over, especially if you were on a ridge. We didn't really, I mean, you could see them coming, so we really didn't have any problems. Lots of different kinds of terrain there, though. There was grassy terrain, there was rocky terrain. This is us going into Sagarmatha National Park, which is where Mount Everest is located. So we needed to pay for permits, show our passports. This is one of the bridges. And I'm going to pass this in just a minute, but there is a whole line of mules coming across with gas. It's really long. It takes a long time. So on a bridge like this, you just want to make sure that there's nothing coming on the other side. But these bridges were not as scary as I thought. They were actually quite stable. This is Namche Bazaar. We got in at dark. This was the next morning. There's a heart in the air. I would not be able to name probably any of these mountains except for the ones that I know are Mount Everest in one spot and Amadablam. There are so many, you're just surrounded by mountains. The yaks were beautiful and they just grazed in the open. They weren't fenced in. These two were
Ornery?
I don't know. They were actually much friendlier than I expected with those horns. And that's Tanya, our leader, and Adish, our guide. I just thought that these were run by water. Those weren't, but there were prayer wheels everywhere. I spun as many as I could because how can we have enough prayers in this world? Or not, how can we not have enough? These are just some more bags that the porters carry.
Morning.
A stupa on the way, that was one of the most beautiful stupas. Amadablam, that's the only one I know. And you can see they're carrying barrels of something. He's carrying quite a big load of supplies up to the tea houses. And that's what a tea house typically looked like inside. This was a monastery. The view from there was amazing. This was a female monastery that we went to. We tried to go in, but it was closed. But it was a really interesting looking place. Very rustic looking. Lots of mani stones or mani stones with prayers on them. I think there was one day that we crossed 6 or 7 bridges. They don't have washers or dryers. They do all of their washing by hand. That actually was hold on. This was one of our acclimation days because we would stop periodically. We stopped twice on the way up to acclimate. So we would spend 2 nights in one place, and then we would do an acclimation hike the next day. You can see the trail. You can just see the outline of the trail. That's where we went that day. And there's a saying that you climb high and sleep low. So while we're there, we climbed high and then we slept low before moving on again the next day. Momos. And this was just a fun spot that we were having fun at.
Glad you had fun.
Yes. We saw on somebody in an adaptive chair whose legs didn't work, and there, I think there might have been, I can't remember if there were 15 or 20 people, because just imagine how hard that would be to carry one of those up the mountain. This was a solar heater that they used to boil water at the tea houses with. This was a memorial for people who had died on Mount Everest. That's a griffin bird, but one of the pictures I had was a picture of Scott Fisher's memorial.
So what did you take the pictures with?
Just my phone. Adish and Berta are our guides. Okay, so this next batch is, you'll see Everest. This is Everest, right, Jim?
Clear weather.
And I did not actually go on this particular part. This was a trip to Kalapatar, which is supposed to be the best place to view Everest. And I was violently ill the day before we went to Everest. So I couldn't go on that trip, but I gave my camera to our guide Adish, and he took it up and took pictures for me. So the next day when we went to base camp, I wasn't even sure I was going to make it to base camp. I was very ill. So my leader said, just get some fresh air. We're going to have to stop here on the way back. If you're not feeling well, we can pick you up. But I think if you just start, you'll feel fine. And that's what I did, and I did make it. So I need to stop here. So this was
it food related or breathing?
I don't really know.
Or
I don't know. It was a stomach sickness, so I assumed that I had drank bad water, but I don't know that may be it could be a symptom of altitude too. I'm really not sure, but it only lasted for about 24 hours. I did, before I left, I got Diamox, which helps to open up your lungs so that you can breathe better. So I took that twice a day, and that did help my lungs. It was still very tiring, but I can't imagine what it would have been like without it. And I also had an antibiotic for a sick stomach, like if I was severely sick, to take this medication. And at some point I decided I needed to take the medication. And I guess the timing was good because I did end up getting to Everest. So this was what we went for. This was our goal, to get to Everest Base Camp. And you can see that there's a flag. That flag has 1,300 names on it, and they all represent either kids that are living with Duchenne now, or kids that have passed from Duchenne. So we said all of their names into the wind with prayers of hope for a cure or great advances in Duchenne into the air. So that's what we did there. And then we had coconut cookies and started immediately back down the trail.
What's the elevation at base camp?
It's about 17,500 feet.
Wow.
I mean, it's pretty amazing. You do go pretty slowly. You just feel very out of shape because it's such hard work to breathe.
Did all of you make it up there?
We all made it there. So it was wonderful. Before I do the rest of it, I just want to tell you a little bit about the tea houses. The tea houses, they had food, they had rooms, bathrooms. The bathrooms are not what you're used to around here. The bathrooms, the higher up that you got, I called them squatty potties. And you needed to bring your own toilet paper because there was no toilet paper there. And you often didn't have a bathroom in your room. It was often in the hallway somewhere. There were sometimes showers, and as long as you remembered the directions on which levers and buttons to push in which order, then you might get a hot shower. There was one person in our group who misunderstood the directions and forgot to do one of the things they were supposed to do, and came out with the most frightening look because it was so cold. So the tea houses, as they're named, we did have tea in the tea houses. We stopped along the way frequently during the day. It broke up our trek, and it gave us some more hydration, and just a chance to rest. So I liked mint tea, and they made fresh mint tea. They put their mint leaves in it. It was beautiful. Or I didn't drink as much coffee, but I did have masala tea, and I often had honey, lemon, ginger tea. For food, most of the tea houses on the way up, they mostly had the same kind of menus. So for breakfast, I usually had some kind of porridge with apples. At lunchtime and dinner time were kind of the same kinds of foods. So we would have noodles mixed with eggs, or there would be potato things. We had one of our members who liked eating pizza. The pizza was very different because it wasn't cow cheese, it was yak cheese. And I found the yak cheese and the yak butter to taste very different than what I'm accustomed to. They also had things like Sherpa stew or dal bhat in places. I really liked dal bhat. I liked momos. So those were some of the things that we had to eat. For sleeping, you're going to see a picture in the next part what the rooms looked like. Each room had a twin bed on each side with some kind of table or plywood base to put your phone or things on in the middle, and then windows. And we were told that we should crack our windows open each night because it would help us with our breathing, because I think it sounded like you could wake up gasping for air and just be unused to the altitude. So we slept with our windows open a little bit, but the tea houses were unheated. There was heat in the middle, in the room that we ate in, and you'll see one tea house with nobody in it, with just a stove in the middle. It's heated with wood, and it heats the whole area, and it's surrounded by windows, and the only time it was heated was when we were eating dinner, for sure. Sometimes it was heated in the morning, but I tried not to get up too early because I didn't want to start the day cold, because I just can't do anything when I'm cold. So I slept in my sleeping bag. My sleeping bag probably wasn't as warm as it could have been. I wasn't really thinking, so I brought my light sleeping bag because I wasn't even going to have to carry it, but I was aware that the porters were going to need to carry things. So I didn't want it to be too heavy, so I brought this one. We did have blankets on the beds, so you could use the blankets. I got this very warm liner to go inside it. I have a different liner that I used on the long trail that was really thin. But this one is warm, and it has feet in the bottom, it has arms, so I could actually get out of here and have my arms without being in a mummy suit. But it was so cold that there were nights that I wore a hat, gloves, 2 pair of socks, my puffy, and my buff to cover my face, because it was so cold. Imagine that you are in Vermont or New Hampshire in a fishing shanty with no heat, and the wind is blowing through it because there's no insulation. That's kind of what it was like when it was really cold at the top. If you were towards the bottom, it wasn't too bad, but we did have nights where it was below 0 when we got towards the top, and it was very cold inside. You're also going to see, I know you've already seen them before, but one of the things that I loved seeing in Nepal were the prayer flags, the stupas, the mani stones, and the prayer wheels. All the way up and back we saw them, and they just gave a really peaceful and magical aura to the countryside. So I'm going to show you the rest of this is just back down. Base camp, I made it. So it's just a stone, and it's that stone that is base camp. And I really didn't. I had these expectations of being more on top of something, but you're not.
How many days did it take for the way up?
It took us 9 days to go up. 2 of those days were days that we stayed in the same spot for acclimatizing. something that was really funny that I thought was funny is we really didn't see snow on the mountains until we got to Everest Base Camp. And our guide told us that everything below base camp was considered a hill to the Nepalese. So I was thinking, what would they consider our hills? Like we think that Mount Washington is high, but it's really, to them, it's just an anthill. There were lots of these things. They called them yak mansions. They were for the yaks, and I just thought it was funny that they were called yak mansions. And there you can see the stove in the middle, but this is when there was nobody in it, but every tea house was immaculately clean like that and shiny. That's Kathy. She had a friend who had passed away almost a year to the day, and she was stopping just to think about him. This is our bed. That was our bedroom, and that pack in the middle, that black bag, is what the porters carried. So everybody on the team had one of those bags to pack. And there were some weight limits because we needed to be able to, we could only put so much weight on the planes and the helicopters. That says carry me back. There is a tremendous amount of pollution on Mount Everest, and so on the way back you could take a bag and they would write your name down, give you a bag, and you could take it down to help. And the bags were very light and it was so easy to do. It was really a nice idea. A mountain goat. That was another kind of pack that some of the porters and people used. That's the monastery. They were pretending they were twins. There were some people that carried their own belongings. There were groups that would carry their own dishes and food, and the guides would cook for them, like not as part of the tea house, but on their own. There's the mint tea. This lady, this was just a funny picture because she was all dressed up and she was walking faster than we were, and it was just very funny. We were trying to see if we could keep up with her, but we couldn't. Usually we would order from a menu like this. So typically at night, after we had had dinner, our leaders would ask us, what do you want for breakfast the next day, and we'd give orders. This was a day that was really, really cold at night, and I knew that the stars were beautiful, so I wanted to get up, but the doors were locked on one side, so I was trying to walk in a field, but I wasn't really sure where I was walking. That's the bag that I carried down. Some of the forests looked very similar to ours. There were pine trees, but there were also places where it was like scree and rolly rock and dry. But always you could see mountains around you. We took a little bit different trek. We took a little bit different route on the way down because we had started in Cirque instead of Lukla. This is a museum. This is the Everest Museum. They had lots of interesting things about Everest in there, lots of information. Water. Yeah, look how heavy that is. And they carried them, they had a strap that they wore around their forehead. I just wondered what how their necks were. And now we're coming back through, we're just exiting the national park. When we got really close to the bottom, there were fresh foods that we hadn't seen anywhere else along the way. We were told not to eat meat once we passed Namche Bazaar because it was just brought up. It could take a long time to get up, and there wasn't what's the word, sanitary. I did bring some of my own snacks, but not a lot of them. I did. Oh, there's this person. Can you see that that's a person?
Oh no, I thought it was a tree.
It looks like a tree, but there's another one that I have. But he's carrying bushes, and you can see his feet right here. But they were carrying everything, and I just thought if I hadn't known that there was a person underneath there, you would easily miss it. And this was school was getting out one day. They did a lot of singing when school was getting out. They would do these songs, and it was very different than here in the U.S. Everything, all the produce was so bright. It was just beautiful. That's a viewpoint. So it's different than our viewpoints, but it was built up with stairs on both sides so that you could look beyond.
What time of year did you say this was?
November, the beginning of November.
So all the climbing was pretty much done at that point?
Yeah, I think the climbing is in a different season, but I'm not really sure about that.
I think so.
It's in May.
There were no tents or anything at base camp.
So did your program allow you to breathe okay and act okay?
Yes, I'll tell you. Yep. It did. What we did is we did acclimation hikes. So every third day we would stop for an acclimation hike. We also used Diamox to open up our lungs. We went slowly because going too fast was a sure way to tire out and maybe not have the lung capacity that you needed. But there were people in our group that were younger and in better shape and wanted to go really fast, and our guides encouraged them not to go faster because I have heard that really great athletes that are used to going fast and doing things at high levels can actually have a harder time with this because their lungs there's not the same amount of oxygen up there to breathe. Let's see how close we are. I think we're almost done here. I'm just going to go a little faster on these. We're almost back. And this is where we reached the place that we're staying. So that's the last picture here. That was where we ended. We were right outside of the airport. You could almost roll to the airport from where we were because it was right outside our window. Our first tea house had been given away because I think it had something to do with there were too many flights that were delayed, so they needed to give those tea houses to the people that were waiting. So we had to get another tea house, but it was very close and it was a nice tea house. So that was my trip, and after that we flew out of Lukla. Lukla has a very scary airport, which we did not thankfully have to go into. Looking at it from where we were, it didn't seem too scary to me because we were flying out. But it was a very short runway and it looked a little bit like somebody's long driveway. And it just went off the edge of a cliff. But I had envisioned what it might have been like if we had to fly into Lukla. And since we didn't have to, it was fine. We were on a little plane. I think there might have been 15 to 18 seats that were on it, but it was really not that bad. I thought that the atmosphere of the trip was peaceful, magical, powerful, and filled with hope. The people along the way were so kind and helpful. Our guides and porters and people that ran the tea houses were very happy and friendly people. The Nepalese are very hard workers. At these altitudes, they do not have the same luxuries that we are accustomed to, yet they live a simple and happy life. I found the trail to be physically, mentally, and personally challenging. And one of the big things that I took away from this is never underestimate the impact that you as an individual can make in this world. I went on this trip not really knowing what would happen. I had never hiked anything higher than Mount Washington around here, which is little in comparison. I also, to make the connection of how I came to do this trek, the year after I hiked the Long Trail, I did the Massachusetts and Connecticut portion of the AT with my hiking partner, and I raised money on my own to go towards the Hope for Gus Foundation for Duchenne. So I did that on my own as an individual, and I raised about $800. And after Tanya saw that, she thanked me, and that's when she invited me on this trip. So that's the full circle connection. When I signed up for this trip, I only needed to raise $1,500 to be able to participate on the trip. So at first, I decided that I would have $5,000 as my goal. And I got a very large donation from a local benefactor, and that pushed me over the 5,000 point. So then I said, let's go for 10,000. So I am happy to say that I raised just shy of $10,000 for the Everest Base Camp. I do not consider myself a person who is a fundraiser. I don't like asking people for money, but I felt like this was such an important trip. It meant so much that I didn't have any problems asking, and that was the whole purpose of me going. So I felt like if I was going to go, I was going to make the most impact that I could. So, it was a difficult trip, but all of you could do it too. It just took some training. I put myself in the back of the pack when I was hiking there because I knew myself well enough to know that when I hike here at home, I like to hike fast, and I knew that would be the death of me if I did that there. So I was the oldest person on the team. We ranged from age 19 to 59, and I put myself in the very back because I knew that if I was in the back, I wouldn't be tempted to go fast, and I would last longer, and that really did work for me. So I don't know if you have questions. I do have another little piece on Kathmandu, but it's really not that different than what you saw in the beginning. So I don't know if you have questions or if
How
there.
did the elevation or here at base camp compare to the Sierras?
The Sierra Buttes, you mean, where I was? That it's
Your
only
training.
about half as much.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
it's 8,000 or 9,000, I think, in California. So I never really got over 8,000 or 9,000 for training. Even in the Dolomites, it was under 9,000. But in the Dolomites, I was carrying 30 pounds on my back because that was a different kind of trip. I went straight from the airport, got off the plane with everything that I was going to hike with, and I hiked with it. So I didn't have a porter or I didn't have a place to put my things while I was waiting. So I think that did help me with my breathing, and I didn't have to make a decision for Tanya until after I came back from that trip. So,
And that drug you were talking about, that,
Diamox?
yeah, how much more oxygen are you able to breathe using that? Or,
I really have no idea. I just know that it opens up your lungs and it helps you to take in the oxygen. It helps you I think it helps you to get more available oxygen in your lungs. I mean, I did feel very out of shape hiking because the altitude just makes you feel really tired. But I slept well. I mean, I enjoyed the trip. There was just one day that I was really ill. Aside from that, it was a great trip. And I'm so happy that I had the chance to do it.
How many days did it take you to come from base camp back down? Did you
It took us, I think, 5. I think it took us 5. It was 7 up and, 8 up and 7 up and 6 down. Let's see. So I started here.
Mm-hmm.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 plus 2 days for acclimation, so that's 9. And then this same day that we got up here, we also started coming back down. So from Gorakshep, we started here to get to base camp on the morning that we did, and then we came right back down. We hiked all the way back down here. So it was much easier hiking down. I mean, aside from how it felt on your knees, your breathing automatically felt better as you went down.
How many miles a day did you usually? Anywhere from what to what?
Well, I don't really know. We didn't hike in Europe and in Nepal. They don't hike in miles per day. It's like hours per day. So we hiked from 5 to 8 hours a day. And it's about 75 miles for the whole trip. And it took us 7 days because we stopped those 2 days. So 7 days, and it's like 38 miles. So we really didn't go that far mileage-wise each day on the way up. Yes?
at what age does a porter stop carrying, working?
I don't know. Our porters we're actually quite young, and Adish is, I think, 36, and he had been trekking since he was, I want to say 16. So he's been doing this for a long time, and this is something that his family does. Since they grow up in that area, their lungs are so accustomed to being at high altitudes that it's not as much work for them. It's kind of the same thing, I think, for the water. Like, I think they drink the water. Do you know, Jim? Do they drink the water? Do you know?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think because it would be like if you went to Mexico and you need to be careful, but they can drink it because their bodies are used to it. So they're really strong. They're about half the size of us, and it's amazing what they can carry.
So how many days in total was it?
It was a 13-day trek.
Are there any facilities at base camp or development? Or is it just rock?
It was just that rock that you saw. It was just that. I hear that during hiking season or climbing season, that there are tents there, but there were no tents when we were there because we were there during trekking season. It was right on the edge of being time to not trek anymore. I think they did it between monsoon seasons. Kate, I would say the helicopter flight, it felt like it was only about 20 minutes. But I had a great view. I was sitting right on the outside with a great big window, and I could see everything below. And it wasn't that loud. It was fun.
So were all those rocks, were those like prayer rocks that had all the
Yes, they're I think they're Manny rocks, but every once in a while you would see a very long section of rocks. I wondered how old they are because they look very old. I don't know how long they've been doing it, but there's a very spiritual, peaceful feeling there. Yes, Vicki.
Sarah, I don't remember the name, it begins with S. What was the name of those?
Oh, the stupas?
Stupas,
Mhm.
that's it. And what's the significance?
I don't really know the significance of them. They are supposed to have, I think, prayers inside of them. And does anybody know? Is that true? I think they're supposed to have prayers inside of them. And for respect, you're supposed to approach them. They're supposed to be on the right, and like if this was a stupa, you walk around them this way, and that's a sign of respect. But they were everywhere. Anyone else? Yes.
On the trek itself, was there a lot of steep up and down, or was it just long, steady,
That's a good question.
like switchbacks?
I felt like it was more of a walk than it was it's very different than hiking in the mountains here. It was more of a walk, and I think what it lacked in terrain difficulty, it made up for in the altitude and the breathing. And I think that may be what differentiates a hike from a trek, is that the trek it's the altitude. Kate.
When you say crazy, the airport was crazy, was it just the lift or was the inside?
Well, it was busy inside, but it was mostly that it was a really short runway. It was like if you were flying out of Boston or Manchester, you'd have a much longer runway. This runway was maybe from here to the parking lot outside. It was pretty short. So that's a very short runway for an airport.
Especially at altitude.
Yeah. Olin. Oh, it was okay because I was going away and it was just kind of going off the cliff. It was okay. Anyone else? Kate. I have no idea because I didn't see what it looked like underneath. I've only heard stories about it, and I was so happy that I didn't have to go fly in that way. So I do also want to say before I end that this Tanya is now putting together her next group for next year, and if any of you out there are just wanting to go to hike to Everest Base Camp and help out with Duchenne, let me know because I have the connections.